for those kind of audiobooks. Oh, good.
Some humans ain't human. Some people ain't kind. You open up their hearts, and here's what you'll find. A few frozen pizzas, some ice cubes with hair, a broken popsicle. You don't wanna go there. Some humans ain't human, though they walk like we do. They live and they breathe just to turn your screw. They screw you when you're sleeping. They try to screw you blind. Some humans ain't human. Some people ain't kind. You might go to church, we sit down in a pew. Those humans who ain't human be sitting right next to you. They talk about your family, they talk about your clothes, when they don't know their own ass from their own elbows. Jealousy and stupidity don't equal harmony. Jealousy and stupidity don't equal harmony.
When you're down and troubled and you need some love and care, and nothing, oh, nothing is going right. Close your eyes and think of me, and soon I will be there to brighten up even your darkest night. You just call out my name, and you know wherever I am, I'll come running, see you again. Winter, spring, summer, or fall, all you gotta do is call, and I'll be there. Yes, I will. You got a friend. If the sky above you should turn dark and full of clouds, and that old north wind should begin to blow. Keep your head together and call my name out loud. Pretty soon I'll be knocking upon your door. You just call out my name, and you know wherever I am, I'll come running to see you again. Winter, spring, summer, or fall, all you gotta do is call, and I'll be there. Yes, I will. Hey, ain't it good to know you got a friend when people can be so cold? They'll hurt you, yes, and desert you. They'll take your soul if you let them. Oh, but don't you let them. You just call out my name, and you know wherever I am, I'll come running to see you again. Winter, spring, summer, or fall, all you gotta do is call, and I'll be there. Yes, I will. You got a friend. You got a friend. Ain't it good to know you got a friend?
Good morning. My name is Linda Leibel, and I serve as the President-elect of the Board of Trustees of the Unitarian Universalist Church of Spartanburg this year. Thanks for joining us via live stream this morning. In cooperation with the global and national health authorities, we have suspended all in-person church activities for the time being. Our care for one another and for our community only becomes more important in times like these. Our ministry is expanding with many ways we can all help one another, comfort one another, and grow together, even though we are physically apart. I encourage you to visit our website, uucs.org, for ways you can join in our work. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to me or any of the board members or any of the staff. We're here to serve you. Now, because of the pandemic, several of the events and the meals that were donated as part of our annual auction had to be postponed. Please email to auction@uucs to let us know that you have notified your bidders that you're postponing your auction meal or event. If you don't remember who signed up for your event, contact Palma Eisner. During this troubled time, events may not be able to be rescheduled. Please be patient with one another as we make adjustments, and consider if you want your bid to simply become a donation in support of the work of the church. We will enjoy the warmth and fellowship of our congregation in abundance when the danger from the pandemic is lessened. And now I would like to invite a few friends up here with me. Alicia and Laura Rose Lombardi, when was it, last Sunday? Last Sunday, they welcomed Luca into their life. So we have a little something for you.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, happy birthday, happy birthday to you.
Good morning. Thank you all for joining us this morning, wherever you are and whenever you are joining us. And let me thank once again the team that is making this happen, our audio and video team, our musicians, our board, and all of our staff through communications and worship and care, all those who are making this happen. I want to begin by calling your attention to an announcement that was posted on our private Facebook page for the congregation, and that is circulated through our community. And if you're not in our immediate community, I imagine there are similar notices where you are, and that is to give blood. There is great need for blood now. We have had members of our congregation who have needed transfusions of blood even in the last week. And I want to take this opportunity to encourage you, please, to give. For all of you who have given and who are a part of this conversation by asking when you can give again, thank you for your spirit of service and generosity. I'd like to take another moment to bring to your attention a few books. And I want to encourage you to engage in the discussion of these books, whether you have read them or not. The coming week in our congregation is going to be full of thinking, critical always and certainly at this time. And by bringing these books to your attention, I want to encourage you to engage in our thinking together. The first is an extraordinary history of our country called Harvest of Empire by Juan Gonzalez. This is a history of Latinos in America. This book covers the history of North and South America from the pre-Columbian era up to the present day. Speaking Down Barriers, one of our partner organizations, will hold 2 discussions of this book tomorrow. You do not have to have read the book to take part. You can find information about the discussions and how to connect at speakdownbarriers.org. The discussions are at 12 and at 12 p.m. and 7 p.m. Eastern Time tomorrow, Monday. Please take part. And then on Wednesday, our own fellowship reading group will cover 3 books that we've read over the last 3 months, summarizing all 3 books in a discussion that will last for a little over an hour. We'll meet on Wednesday evening at 7, and the books that we'll look at are Soul Work, a series of anti-racist dialogues that reshaped anti-racism work in the UU, Sacred Service in Civic Space, which is a history of 300 years of Unitarian Universalist activism in our communities, and Soul Repair, which is a startling and powerful book about moral injury in war for both those who serve our nation as combatants and for our nation as a whole. It is a very fair, even-handed, and insightful book, a profound book of pastoral care. I want to encourage you to join in that discussion. Even if you haven't read the books, you will have insight that is very welcome. We are concluding the month of April and heading into May. And in the month of May, we are going to work with one more book. It is my favorite of all books. It has been since the end of my high school career and the beginning of college. And it is Albert Camus' book, The Plague. This book is about the French resistance during World War II through the metaphor of life in a pandemic. I want to encourage you to get this book and to read it. It is a profound and meaningful book that asks the question, what would you do with your life when faced with your mortality? Get this book and read it with us this coming month. As you can see from what we are doing in 1 week, this church is up to something. And I want to thank you for being a part of it. Many of you reached out to me personally this week and asked, are you okay? We are using a closer shot in our live stream broadcast, and so you can see me more clearly than I may see myself in the mirror. Are you okay? And I am doing as well as anyone during this time, feeling stress and feeling worry, feeling anger. But in addition to that, I want you to know that I am doing very well. And the reason that I am doing well is because of you. In the last 2 weeks, this congregation and friends in our wider community, a community that is expanding beyond any geographic barriers that we know how to draw. In the last 2 weeks, that whole circle of people has raised more than $6,000 through our Share the Plate in support of immigrants in Spartanburg, people who will not receive federal assistance in any other way during the time of pandemic. There has been an extraordinary outpouring of generosity from you. And beyond that, those gifts combined with gifts to our Minister's Discretionary Fund to provide direct financial support for other people in immediate need. Those two Share the Plates combined have raised more than $10,000 in the last 6 weeks. And beyond the immediate financial resources that your generosity has provided, our leadership in beginning these funds has caused 2 new funds to be opened, one in Spartanburg and one in Greenville, at much larger community institutions who can gather in resources from many more sources than we ourselves are able to do, all in support of the immigrant community in the upstate. And beyond this financial giving, this congregation has produced more than 250 masks for people to wear and has distributed those to members of our congregation, members of the South Converse neighborhood, and to many of our community agency partners who have clients with compromised immune systems and other underlying health conditions, so that the use of a mask is critical to their well-being. You have promoted and participated in and asked when you can take part again in blood drives. You have published, researched and published, and then made calls and sent emails to advocate for better public policy week by week, and sometimes multiple times in a week during the pandemic. And you have caused us through that to be in even greater coordination with community partners and with our local government. Through you and your participation in this service every week, we have moved from about 60 viewers to an average of 330 viewers to now more than 550 views each week of this service, far exceeding the membership and active participation of this congregation. And this has happened because you found meaning in this service and decided to share it. It's not the number of views that I care about so much, but the energized network of sharing that you are exhibiting as I watch those numbers rise. That is what gives me heart. Early in the pandemic, I asked us to find our purpose, and we have found it: to care for our congregation and for our community. And our definition of congregation and community have vastly expanded because we have been on that purpose. When we live in our purpose, when we do our work, an energy moves. It flows, it connects us, and I can feel it. And even in stress and worry and anger, in these times and at any time, even in all that would bring me and any one of us down, when I feel that energy from you move out, I am enlivened by it. I feel alive. I feel a fire of the mind and the heart burning in me, and I am awake. Awakened by you and with you to do what we need to do now in the world. I am doing very well. Thank you.
The prophetic tasks of the church. by Old Testament scholar and theologian Walter Brueggemann. The prophetic tasks of the church are to tell the truth in a society that lives in illusion, grieve in a society that practices denial, and express hope in a society that lives in despair.
From the crush of wealth and power, something broken in us all waits the Spirit's silent hour, pleading with a poignant call. Bind all my wounds again. Even though our hearts are weary of the friend we need so much, when I see the pain you carry, shall I with a gentle touch bind all your wounds again? When our love for one another makes our burdens light to bear, find the sister and the brother hungry for the feast we share. Bind all their wounds again. Every time our spirits languish, terrified to draw too near, may we know each other's anguish, and with love that casts out fear, bind all our wounds again.
The prophetic: truth, grief, fire, and now hope. And we are a people of faith and hope. That is how the covenant of this congregation begins. This covenant that guides the ways in which we live in relation with one another. This covenant that helps us know how to support not only this community of faith, but also the larger community. This covenant that guides us as we share truth, as we grieve, as we light fire, as we hope, and as we share hope. It helps us become the prophetic people that we are called to be. For those of you who know the covenant, I invite you to say it with me. And if you don't know it, please listen to the words and know that they are intentional, and that the members of this church take these words very seriously as we strive to be a prophetic community in our world. We are a people of faith and hope. Together we covenant to strive to become our better selves, to honor both the critical mind and the generous heart, to prove that diversity need not mean divisiveness, and to respond to systems of violence and oppression with the power of a love beyond belief. When we are here together in this place, we would now gather around the rippling bowl to place a stone or a shell in the water as a way to share our joys and concerns. We know that joys are shared or multiplied and concerns shared or lessened. Although we are not together physically, we are together. I'd like to invite you now to share the joys and concerns that you are holding on to. Please take a moment during the silence to share a greeting with one another, by text, by email, or just holding one another in your thoughts. Please share your joys and concerns. Even though we are not physically together in this place right now, we are most definitely connected.
We share the plate this Sunday in solidarity with and in service to members of our community who are immigrants, who are undocumented, and who are being targeted during this pandemic to receive no support for themselves or their families. If you go to our website, www.uucs.org, just below this live stream, you will find a button that says Help. And if you scroll down the page that opens, this Help page, you will find many ways that we can be of service to our community. Thank you to all who are already engaging in these ways of service. I invite all of us to engage again. At the very bottom of that page, you will find a button for Share the Plate. By clicking on that link, you can give to this cause. We are providing direct assistance to families who, because of their citizenship status, although they are essential members of our economy and community and culture, are not eligible to receive any assistance during this time of financial strain for us all. We have formed a team, members of this congregation and members of the Alianza Spartanburg, formerly called the Hispanic Alliance, and members of the Pasos site in Spartanburg, which serves the Hispanic community. We have formed a team that is overseeing needs and managing direct assistance through this fund. After this month is over, we will continue this fund and set up a separate way to give so that if you desire to continue to contribute to this, you can. Our plan is to continue to provide support for these neighbors of ours into the foreseeable future, far beyond the limits of this month. And if you look on that same help page, you will see another link, an advocacy section asking you to call and email representatives for better public policy. There is a bullet point there about a bill that will come before the House, a bill that advocates for these members of our society, people who pay billions of dollars in taxes every year, and yet who are receiving no assistance. This bill would change that. It would provide direct federal assistance to all of these families during this crisis. I want to urge you to give, to be a part of the work of mercy of our church. And I want to urge you to call and email your representatives to do the work of justice of this church. When we act with both mercy and justice, we are acting in the fullness of love. Love for people on whom we absolutely depend, on whom our food supply chains, without whom our food supply chains and our community, our economy and our culture and our way of life would collapse. These are our siblings, our brothers and our sisters, on whom we depend and who depend on us now. Let us give and let us advocate. Let us act in love. Let us bring our gifts.
Bright those jewels of the skies, where in sable darkness glow.
Hope. I remember so distinctly walking across the campus at Wofford College when I was a student. It was a bright spring day, absolutely beautiful under those noble trees. And I was walking beside a professor. We had just been part of a reading group, not part of any class, just a group of students and professors that wanted to do some additional reading together, reading Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s letter from the Birmingham jail. We read the text, shared a meal, and discussed that transformative document from our nation's history. Different views, different opinions, and many memories from those who had been alive during the civil rights movement. It was a rich time of study. And then, leaving the dining hall and headed back to class and to the work of our lives, I found myself beside one of these professors. And he shared with me the story of when he was a young man, a teenager. He traveled to the March on Washington in the early 1960s. He gathered with all of those people on our nation's mall and heard Dr. King's voice echo across our nation's capital, saw people from every corner of our country, of every ethnicity, of every racial identity, people of every religion gathered in unity to fight for civil rights, to fight for a dream, the vision of a society of equity and fairness, of justice, a beloved community of love where everyone belonged and everyone had a chance. He talked about what it felt like to be headed into his adult life, experiencing this moment with so many other people, the feeling of being together and working together, the vision of glory, of possibility that was unveiled before his eyes, standing there in the throng, seeing what he knew was needed, what could and should be, seeing it become possible. When the march was over, he traveled back home, walked into his house, opened up a letter, and found that he'd been drafted for the Vietnam War. He went off to serve his country as he had been asked to do. And the damage that the war inflicted on him, the wounds of mind and body that he sustained on our behalf, however right or wrong the cause may have been, the wounds that he sustained were still visible to me as I walked beside him across Wofford's campus, across that smaller but no less beautiful mall, talking about what is possible and what is real. He said, when I was at the March on Washington and saw all those people together, it was like a veil parted, and I could see what can and should be. It was like looking into glory, a fiery light surrounding us all. And when I went home and opened the draft letter, the veil slammed shut. There is so much cause for despair. Massive forces of politics and economics and ideology shape our lives. It does us no good to act like it's not true. And even in this moment, we see the way in which those massive forces work in the finest and most obtrusive and insidious detail. Neighbors who even now, this weekend, disregard warnings and directives for social distancing. Governors who are opening states, our state and neighboring states and sister states all across our country, against all science and all data and all public health guidance. Presidents, not only our president, although certainly our president, presidents here and in Brazil and in Russia and many other places, here and elsewhere, who are, by their disregard of science and data and public health warnings and the simple common sense of what is good for communities, are provoking additional crises. And let me just interrupt this meditation to please implore you, do not spray yourself or inject yourself or ingest disinfectant. That a minister in South Carolina feels the need to contradict the President of the United States on what should be obvious to anyone who can read the warning labels on a bottle shows us the surreal times in which we are living and the inanity of leadership that we are living under. The crush of wealth and power is everywhere to be seen. And that poll numbers don't change that much week to week is only further cause for despair. We work so hard. We give with an outpouring of generosity. We serve tirelessly, working through our fatigue, through our weary fingers, through our glazed eyes in front of Zoom calls and screens. We give and we serve. We advocate and we call. And we envision the world that can and should be. We catch a glimpse of it, of what we know is possible, only to see the veil pulled shut. Where are we to find hope? All month, we have entered into the prophetic tradition of the West, celebrating Passover and Easter and Ramadan with our Jewish and Christian and Muslim siblings. We first have studied Judaism in the celebration of Passover, how the prophet Moses and the prophetic people of the covenant, the people of Israel, moved out of enslavement and hierarchical oppression to create a new form of ethical and communal life, a life encoded in covenant that is handed down to us even to this day. We have heard a covenant crafted by this congregation, read and shared already in this service. We are direct inheritors of that tradition. In celebration of Easter, we told the story how out of grief, the early church reversed the inequities of the Roman Empire by becoming a people of radical sharing, people who cared for one another and gave to one another so that all had what they needed. And the Roman Empire, in its violence and oppression, shook to its very foundations. And last week, as the month of Ramadan prepared to begin, we told the story of the Prophet Muhammad and of the Muslim Ummah, the community of unity and justice that transformed the abuses of a burgeoning international market capitalism to create a community of justice and sharing. And in this prophetic tradition, whether we hold to any of those religious beliefs or not, in the tradition that they established and have handed on to us, in every age, new voices of conscience and action step forward. People who read the social and political, the economic and spiritual signs of their day to call for solidarity, mercy and advocacy, love and justice for those most vulnerable in their societies. Paine, Emerson, Marx, Goldman, Chomsky, Sen, the Grimkes, Douglas, Thurman, Rustin, Dr. King, Malcolm X, Dr. Barber, Camus, Sartre, de Beauvoir, Arendt, Para, Neruda, Galeano, Sigma. We are their descendants, inheritors of a tradition in which we step forward to read the political, economic, and spiritual dynamics of our time, to stand with those who are most vulnerable in our society, to build a world more livable for us all. And I can hear us in dialogue, you and me, congregation and minister. And I can hear a wise and correct voice, a voice that is in me too, listening to that litany of names, listening to that long tradition, a tradition across millennia, a voice that says, yeah, very inspiring, but we know that every one of those people failed. We know that what every one of those people strove for, from the Hebrew people who became the people of Israel, to a band of friends who became the early Christians, to a small group of people who became the Muslim Ummah, to movements and prophets, intellectuals and scholars and artists and statespeople and economists and friends, down to this very day, what they strove for ended, at best, in partial victories. And when they became institutions, they very often became the opposite of what they said they would be. Hypocrites. We have failed, and over again, as a people and as institutions and as a world, we have not lived the ideals that we proclaimed. Where can we find hope? In her essential work, Fields of Blood, scholar of religion Karen Armstrong looks at the evolution of societies, of civilization, from the agricultural revolution to our present day. And she looks at the way structural violence is created in order to sustain the economies of civilization after civilization. An acceptable level of violence through state enforcement of labor, violence that is economic and political, but that religious authorities rush to support. The way religion marries to structures of violence to sustain a higher and higher quality of life for the majority of society at the expense of a few. An acceptable level of violence to benefit some to the detriment of others. She shows how this happens in every age. It is a profound reading of history, detailed and studied, compelling. And she shows how in every age a small group of people steps forward, a prophetic people, Hindu, Buddhist, Jewish, Muslim, Christian, Taoist, Confucian, Enlightenment, scientific, modern, and postmodern, how in every age a small community emerges to say there is another way. And that group, at first shut down and then with power, transforms its culture just a little before it is absorbed into the cycle of violence again. A constant cycle of prophecy and transformation and failure. Armstrong says, maybe the role of religious communities is to keep holding up an ideal which we never fully achieve, but for which we always strive. But that formulation could also be stated, perhaps the role of religious communities is to always strive for an ideal that we can never fully achieve. I understand the philosophy of that. I see the historical pattern. She is a brilliant scholar on whom I depend. And I find that idea utterly disheartening. I feel in it despair. Where can we find hope? find hope in you. I find hope in you. In your smallest acts of goodness, you give me hope. When a person in the interconnected network of this congregation speaks the truth and kindness with a real care for another person, just a word of truth and kindness. Or when a person in this networked congregation does an act of deliberate, focused justice in a spirit of love, one act of justice done in love, I feel it. I feel it. It's a physical sensation that I feel when I hear the stories or witness firsthand what you do. And it moves like a surge of energy through me. This is real. What I am telling you is real. I feel it. I feel the smallest acts of truth and kindness, justice and love. And when two people act, just 2 or 3 people, when our acts connect with one another and build on one another, I feel energy rise and move and surge. I feel light and heat, like an internal fire, rise in me. I would not say this if it was not true. I feel it viscerally. You fuel fire in me. You give me life by making the vision of what can be come alive. This is real, and it is glory in my mind and in my body. I can feel it in my veins. I feel it right now. I am very good at visions and ideals. I can see through the veil. Even when it is closed, I can see through the veil to what can and should be. That visionary gift is one of the gifts of my life. What I am not so good at, and many of you know this firsthand, is the small, practical, necessary acts that pull the veil open for us all. I'm not good at them. I fumble. I'm clumsy. I'm too late. I'm too unplanned. I'm too scattered. I'm not good at the execution and the follow-through. I drop things. I misfold. I do the wrong sealing and stamping and addressing. I get it all messed up. I am gifted at the ideal and the visionary, but not in the practical. But you are, and you make that glory real. The things you do, the practical acts of care and kindness and justice, the things that build community, just by talking on the phone with one another, just by offering one another food, just by saying a truthful and kind word, just by plugging in this video camera and being sure it's connected to the internet so that everyone else can watch it, being sure this microphone is turned on. You should watch me try to turn on the microphone. Or playing the keyboard. You don't want to see me try to do that. Just by doing the simplest things, a push of a button, the plug of a cord, the pressure on a key, these things give life. They give life to me. They give life to us all. They are fuel to the fire, and I feel them. So many of these acts are small, very small, the opposite of grand and luminous visions of glory. Think of the stitches that make up one mask. Think of the endless hunt for elastic. Think of short texts, 1 or 2 words, or just an emoji to check in with one another, to cheer one another on and to keep one another going. Genuine care when someone is hurting. The simple daily maintenance of a friendship over years and decades. a meal cooked and shared, a short trip to this church to pick up limbs when nobody's watching, to scatter seed at the start of the season, to haul off wood after a tree has fallen, a drive-by in the early morning or just at dusk to be sure shingles are still on after another storm, to be sure trees are still standing, a basket of strawberries laid at a doorstep. When I speak with you about these acts, very often you shrug them off. They're just what you do. Yet the effect of these small acts is big. It is very big. It is grand and luminous, full of glory. In just the last 2 weeks, from gifts in the amount of $5 and $10, sometimes $50 and $100, this community and friends in our greater community have raised more than $6,000 to support immigrants in Spartanburg. From gifts that small, we have done something that big. And you better believe I felt that. Over the last 6 weeks, from those kinds of gifts, $5, $10, $50, $100, some gifts larger, but not many, more than $10,000 has been raised to support our immigrant community and people in financial distress in Spartanburg. And from our gifts, fantastic as all of that is, generous as all of that is, from our gifts, 2 new funds have been created in Spartanburg and in Greenville to support the immigrant community, funds that already have raised more money than we have raised. That's not people outdistancing us. That's us breaking ground, leading people to do something of much greater scale. That is exponential growth. That is a small act, a first act, becoming visionary. 250 masks and more have been created by this congregation, shared with people in our community, with our neighbors, with people in organizations that are partners with us, to be shared with clients who are sick, who have underlying health conditions, and whose lives are at risk by the reckless public policy of our state and federal government. We are stepping in to help. A simple mask made on a dusted-off sewing machine, saving a life. And each of these prophetic traditions, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, proclaim that a life saved is a whole world saved. The work of a mask, creating a whole world. The small becomes very big. And if a mask does that, what does a donation of blood do? And the work of advocacy. It is such frustrating work to research and to call, just to get up the courage to make those calls and to encounter voicemails that are full, people who won't pick up the phone. But through our advocacy, whether the people we call hear us or not, other people hear us, people who are watching what we're doing and who are paying attention and who are joining on board so that our work of justice becomes leadership in our community and other people engage in it as well, and thinking shifts from a culture of obedience and ownership to one of equity and truth and real democracy. The work of advocacy that can drive us absolutely up the wall, feeling like we're making no headway at all, is a change to the whole way our culture works and the way we live as members of a democratic society. It is empowerment of the people. The growth of this service by hundreds of viewers, not through any marketing campaign, not through any slick PR, but simply because you found meaning in it, that there was something in it to nourish you, and you wanted to share that with someone else you love. The simple act of feeding one another through the songs and stories that we share on Sunday has caused those songs and stories to reach out in circles beyond anything that we could measure as a congregation. I have said that our purpose is to care for our congregation and our community. And these are good and beautiful words. But what illuminates these words? What makes them not just good but true? What fills them with glory? What makes them come alive and grow and expand to something of far greater size? Something truly visionary, so that those words get up, stand up and walk, and do something in our world. The thing that makes that happen are our actions. And it is what we have done day after day during this pandemic, in your smallest actions, that has revealed that glory, that light, that vision of what we can and should be. You make the vision real. This is the power of a prophetic people. The vision is real when we make it so. This is the fire of transformation we bring into the world. The smallest acts of truth and kindness and justice and love, the very smallest acts, tear open the veil. And in our actions, we and all around us see what can and should be. Walter Brueggemann is a scholar of the prophetic tradition. And he writes, the prophetic tasks of the church are to tell the truth in a society that lives in illusion, to grieve in a society that practices denial, and to express hope in a society that lives in despair. We feel that despair. The truth we speak is the world that we know can be. The grief we feel is that the world is not that we are far from it. The prophetic fire in us is that desire, that heat, that spirit within us that will not die, that insists that we strive for what we know is possible. And we are the hope. We are the hope, contrary to all rational formulas of wealth and power. The paradox where spiritual truth lies, the paradox of our world is that the hope is us. Our acts make real what is possible. That is the practice of mindfulness. That is the practice of love. And this is where I go beyond Karen Armstrong. When we act in truth, in kindness, in justice, in love, when we do those small, practical, daily acts, stitches, calls, meals, care, and kindness, in every one of those acts, the world we know is possible is really there. It's not a vision anymore. You make the visionary real. For that moment, it is real, whole, complete, shalom, salam. And it is the determined, persisting, persevering dedication to sustain that over and over, day after day, month after month, for years and decades and a lifetime, that brings that reality, that visionary reality, into our lived reality, our practical reality, until the massive forces that would dominate us and determine our lives are transformed by our prophetic fire. There is every reason for despair. We do not know what lies ahead. This may well last a long, long time. Our lives will not simply go back to what they were. We will live through boredom. We will live through frustration. We will live through difficulty. Even the term new normal rings hollow, a false prophecy of false hope. And those who we have elected to govern us, whether we want it or not, we elected them. That is our democratic system. Even those we have elected to govern us seem determined to do what is not at all in our best interests, and our fellow citizens seem determined to ardently support them in that, We live in a culture of conformity and obedience and ownership instead of equity and community. And in the face of these massive forces of politics and economics and ideology, what good are a handful of masks when science, data, and public health guidance are discarded? What good are a few $1,000s in an economic system that is imperial in all but name and that has exploited the land and labor of indigenous and Latinx peoples for more than 500 years? What good are calls to advocate for wiser policy when voice mailboxes are full and phones are not answered and who knows what happens to the email? There is every reason to despair. But in your actions, in the smallest acts of truth and kindness and justice and love, we live what can and should be. We embody the vision of what we know is possible. We are the flame. We create the glory. We are the hope. When we do what can and should be, we make real what can and should be, right here and right now. And our only job is to sustain it. And that is fire. I want you to look at our chalice. I want to ask Andrew to pull the camera out if the chalice isn't in view. This chalice is a strange symbol of our movement. It is the smallest flame. And if you look into the heart of the flame, you will see absolutely nothing. There is nothing at the heart of the flame. But in the longest night of winter, in total darkness in this place, in this sanctuary, with our congregation and our community gathered in concentric circles at the winter solstice, this one flame is ignited. One small act by one small set of hands lights that flame that burns out of nothingness. And it illuminates not only the sanctuary, but us all. One small act of prophetic fire transforms the darkness of our hour into a community of justice and glory and love, the community we know is possible. This is real. Our small acts tear open the veil. They are the glory of what we know can and should be for every person in this world. When failure seems certain and hope dims and despair overwhelms, when ignorance and selfishness, misgovernance and greed and fear, when the massive forces of economics and politics and ideology close us off from what we know can and should be, when all of that despair overwhelms us, ignite. One small act illuminates us all with prophetic fire, stronger than any darkness. Never give up. Tear open the veil. You are the light of the world.
If I could tell the world just one thing, it would be we're all okay. And not to worry, 'cause worry is wasteful and useless in times like these. I won't be made useless, won't be idle with despair. I will gather myself around my faith, 'cause life past most fear. My hands are small, I know, but they're not yours. They are my own, but they're not yours. They are my own, and I am never broken. Poverty stole your golden shoes, but it didn't steal your laughter. Heartache came to visit me, but I knew it wasn't ever after. We will fight, not out of spite, but someone must stand up for what's right. Where there's a man who has no voice, there ours shall go singing. My hands are small, I know, but they're not yours. They are my own, but they're not yours. They are my own, and I am never broken. In the end, only kindness matters. In the end, only kindness matters. I will get down on my knees and I will pray. I will get down on my knees and I will pray. I will get down on my knees and I will pray. My hands are small, I know, but they're not yours. They are my own, but they're not yours. They are my own, and I am never broken. My hands are small, I know, but they're not yours. They are my own, but they're not yours. They are my own, and I am never broken. We are never broken. We are God's eyes. We are God's mind. We are God's eyes. We are God's hands. We are God's heart. We are God's hands. God's hands. God's hands.
The Prophetic Tasks of the Church by Walter Brueggemann. The prophetic tasks of the church are to tell the truth in a society that lives in illusion, grieve in a society that practices denial, and express hope in a society that lives in despair.
We are the hope. Every small act tears open the veil to what is real and now. We are hope.